Close the curtains first. The way she said it wasn't an order in the strict sense. It was softer, meant for the room, but it landed on me like it carried something else. I didn't answer right away. My hand lingered on the fabric, the light from the window spilling across my wrist. Afternoon sun, pale gold. Outside, the office street hummed with people I couldn't see. Inside, it was just the two of us, and her voice. She leaned against the edge of the desk, arms folded loosely, as if she wasn't really waiting but somehow was. The kind of posture that said she had lived more than enough years to never rush. Mid-40s, elegant without trying. Hair pulled back, a few strands loose around her face. I'd seen her like this every day, but never quite like this. The curtains slid shut with a muted sound. The room changed instantly. The light dimmed, air heavier, as though everything outside had been sealed away. When I turned back, she hadn't moved. Now what? The words slipped out before I could stop them. I meant them casual, almost teasing, but the way her eyes caught mine made them sound like something else. Her gaze lingered too long, steady but not unkind. My throat felt dry. You always ask questions, she said finally, not looking away. But never the ones you mean. I didn't know what to do with that. My fingers curled against my palm, restless. She noticed, I could tell. She noticed everything. The air between us shifted in ways I couldn't name. A draft from the closed window touched her blouse, the fabric brushing against her skin just enough for me to see the line of her collarbone. She tucked a strand of hair behind her ear, a movement so small, but it drew my eyes, and she let them stay there for a second longer than polite. Her perfume, warm, faintly floral, the kind that didn't announce itself, but waited until you were close enough to be caught by it. I was caught. She set her hand on the desk, fingers spread lightly on the polished surface. My eyes fell to them. Slim, graceful, the kind of hands that carried authority without effort. Then, casually, they brushed against mine as I leaned closer to reach for a file. Not an accident, though it looked like one. The skin on skin was brief, but it left a heat I couldn't hide. I exhaled too sharply. She noticed that, too. You're nervous, she said. Not mocking. More like she was testing the truth of it. I tried to laugh it off, but it came out shallow. Wouldn't you be? Her lips curved. Not a smile, not exactly. More like something she didn't want to say. The silence stretched, filled with the tick of the clock and the muffled city outside. But inside, it was charged, alive, as if the room was leaning in to hear what would happen next. She tilted her head, studying me in that unhurried way of hers. You shouldn't look at me like that. Like what? My voice was lower than I expected. Another pause. She didn't answer. She didn't have to. The knock came then, sharp, sudden, breaking everything. A voice outside, calling her name. She straightened, her hands slipping from the desk. The look in her eyes shuddered in an instant. I stood frozen, curtains closed, heartbeat too loud. The door handle turned. The door had closed behind the visitor, leaving the room quieter than before. But the silence wasn't empty. It was loaded. She moved back to her chair, smoothing her skirt as though nothing had happened. I stayed standing, unsure if my legs would cooperate if I tried to sit. You're still here, she said, eyes on a stack of papers she wasn't really reading. Maybe I should go. Maybe you should. Her tone was even, but she didn't look up. I didn't move. It wasn't the first time I'd lingered too long in her office. I told myself it was because she had more to teach me, that I was ambitious, that I wanted to learn. But that wasn't the full truth. The truth was harder to admit. To her, to myself. She had been divorced for years. I knew it not from gossip, but from the way her ring finger bore a faint, permanent mark where gold had once rested. I'd seen it in passing, when she adjusted her watch or handed me a folder. And every time, it felt like a secret I shouldn't have noticed. I'd had no great loves, no long commitments, just clumsy, short-lived things with people who never saw me the way I wanted to be seen. She did, or at least I thought she did. Sometimes when she leaned too close to show me a note, her breath warm against my cheek, I wondered if she was aware of what she was doing to me. The age difference wasn't just numbers. It was the weight of perception, of judgment. 22 against 46. People would talk, would assume. Maybe she knew that. Maybe that was why she never let herself linger too long. But now, as she rose to set a file on the shelf, her shoulder brushed against mine. Not hard, not even deliberate, but my body tensed like it had been touched by fire. She paused, aware of it, her breath catching almost imperceptibly before she stepped aside. "Careful," she said softly, though there was nothing I was at risk of knocking over. I nodded, though my heart wasn't listening. Her eyes flicked to me then, just a glance, brief but searing. It was the kind of look that left questions hanging in the air, questions neither of us dared to voice. "You're too young to be so serious," she murmured, returning to her desk. "And you're too beautiful to pretend you don't notice," I replied, the words slipping out raw, unpracticed. Her hand froze mid-motion, pen hovering above paper. For a long second, she didn't breathe. Then she placed the pen down, slow and deliberate, and met my gaze. Neither of us spoke. The room felt smaller, closer, as if the air itself had shifted to press us together. She reached for a document, but her fingers brushed against mine in the handoff. This time, she didn't pull away. Neither did I. A pause. Her skin against mine. Unspoken electricity sparking in the quiet. The curtain was still closed. The office was too quiet again, though this time it felt dangerous, like one wrong move would set everything tumbling. I stood at her side as she pointed to a document spread across the desk. Our shoulders brushed. Neither of us stepped back. Her voice was steady, but softer than usual. "You should pay attention to this clause. Most people overlook it." I nodded, but my eyes weren't on the paper. They followed the curve of her lips as she spoke. When she noticed, her words faltered, just for a beat, before she continued. That was when the knock came. We both startled. She pulled her hand from the page too quickly, and I nearly stepped back into the filing cabinet. "Come in," she called, her tone suddenly brisk, professional. A colleague stepped inside, cheerful, oblivious. He asked her about schedules, deadlines, trivial things. I answered one question meant for her, my voice too eager, too sharp, and she glanced at me, warning, restrained. When he finally left, the door clicking shut, the silence roared. "You can't do that," she said quietly. "Do what?" "Step in like that. People notice." Her hand rested on the desk, knuckles pale. I swallowed. I wasn't thinking. That's exactly the problem. The reprimand stung, but her eyes betrayed her. They lingered on me, long enough to undo her words. I moved closer without meaning to. She didn't move away. Her breath brushed my cheek as she leaned slightly forward, about to reach for another file. But the space between us thinned to something unbearable. My chest tightened. The world shrank to the faint warmth of her skin, the way her lashes lowered, how her lips parted as if to say something she couldn't. For a moment, we hovered on the edge of something irreversible. Then her phone buzzed on the desk. The sound shattered the spell. She jerked back, snatching the phone as though it might save her. Her face turned from me, but I caught the faint flush along her neck. I stayed rooted, heartbeat erratic. She didn't answer the call. She just stared at the glowing screen until it dimmed, then set it face down with a hand that trembled slightly. "We can't," she whispered. Not to me exactly, but into the heavy air. I forced a smile that didn't feel like one. "I know." But I didn't step away. Neither did she. Instead, the gap closed again, her shoulder brushing mine, deliberate this time, her fingers grazing my sleeve as if by accident. She drew in a breath, sharp and unsteady, and when she looked at me, her eyes were full of something she didn't dare say out loud. We stayed like that, too close, too aware, resisting and yielding in the same breath. Outside, footsteps echoed down the hall. Inside, the curtain still hid us. The air between us had grown too heavy to pretend anymore. For days we'd circled the same flame. Brushes of skin, glances stolen, words unsaid. But tonight, the silence cracked. She was standing by the window, the curtains drawn tight as always. I lingered by the desk, hands restless, pulse loud. Neither of us moved for a long time. Then I spoke. My voice came rougher than I meant. "Do you ever think about it?" Her back stiffened. "About what?" "You know what." She turned slowly, her face pale but steady, eyes sharp like they wanted to cut through me. But beneath the sharpness was something else. Fear, maybe. Longing. "You can't ask me that," she whispered. I already did. She pressed her lips together, looking down at her hands. When she finally met my gaze, her eyes shimmered with something that made my chest ache. "You're too young to ruin yourself with me." The words should have ended it. Instead, they lit something reckless in me. I crossed the room in 2 steps. She didn't back away. "Ruin." My voice was low, too close to her ear. "That's not what this feels like." She flinched, not from me, but from the truth in it. My hand rose without permission, brushing a loose strand of hair from her cheek. The softness of it, the heat of her skin beneath my fingertips. I knew I should stop. I couldn't. Her breath hitched, shallow, unsteady. I felt it against my neck, each exhale betraying her composure. "You don't understand," she said, though her voice trembled. "Then make me." Her eyes locked on mine. No more masks. Just the raw, terrifying thing between us. "I tried not to see you," she confessed, her words breaking. "Every day I tried. And then you stayed. And I can't." Her voice cut, sharp as glass. "I can't undo what's already happened." I leaned closer, my forehead almost brushing hers. "Then don't." Her hands gripped the edge of the desk, white-knuckled, as if holding herself in place. But her body leaned, just slightly, toward me. The faintest surrender. The room spun smaller, hotter. Her perfume wrapped around me. The brush of her shoulder against mine turned into a press. I could feel the quick rhythm of her breath, the tremor in her body, the question hanging unspoken between our mouths. "Say it," I whispered. Her eyes closed, a pained sound caught in her throat. "I want." The words broke off as the door handle rattled. We both froze. A knock followed, sharp and insistent. Her hand clutched my sleeve, holding me still. My lips hovered inches from hers. The world balanced on that fragile distance. The knock came again. And then, in the faintest, trembling voice, she whispered, "Don't leave." The knock at the door faded into memory, but its echo lingered in her eyes long after we pretended nothing had happened. Days passed with careful restraint. No glances too long, no touches that could be misread. At least, that was the lie we told ourselves. One evening, I lingered again, helping her sort through reports no one else cared about. She looked tired, shadows under her eyes that no amount of makeup could disguise. When she set down her pen, she sighed, too deeply, too honestly. "You know people talk," she said suddenly, her voice flat. I froze. "About us." Her gaze darted to me, then away. "They notice. The way you stay late. The way I—" She shook her head, as if the thought itself was dangerous. "I heard someone this morning. They think you're infatuated." The word hung between us, heavy and raw. My stomach tightened. "And what do you think?" She didn't answer right away. Instead, she rose to place a file on the shelf. As she passed me, her shoulder brushed mine. Not hard, but deliberate enough that I felt it down my spine. "I think they're not entirely wrong," she whispered. The confession hit harder than I expected. Heat rushed through me, tangled with panic. I stood too quickly, the chair scraping against the floor. She startled, then laughed softly, without humor. "See? Even you can't handle hearing it." "That's not it." My voice shook. "It's just, if anyone finds out." Her eyes flicked to the closed curtains, then back to me. "If anyone finds out, it's my career. My reputation. You'd be fine. People would say you were what? Lucky." She nearly spat the word. I stepped closer, unable to stop myself. "That's not what this is." Her hands trembled where they rested on the desk, so she curled them into fists to hide it. "Then tell me what it is." I should have answered, but words deserted me. Instead, I reached out, brushing the back of my hand against hers. The touch was small, but it made her shiver. "Don't," she whispered, but she didn't move away. "I can't stop." Her breath caught. The space between us shrank again, her body angling unconsciously toward mine. For the first time, she didn't pull back. Instead, her hand grazed my arm, light as air, as though testing if I was real. "This is wrong," she said, barely audible. "Then why does it feel like the only thing that's right?" Her lips parted, eyes wet with a mix of fear and want. For a second, I thought she would answer. Instead, she shook her head, stepping back quickly, too quickly, and knocked over a glass of water. It spilled across the desk, soaking the papers. We both stared at the mess, breathing too hard, hands trembling. She met my gaze, sharp and unsteady. "We can't undo this. Not anymore." The decision hung there, fragile but final, binding us to the path ahead. The office had grown too small for both of us. The spilled water was gone, the papers dried, but the mess remained in the silence we hadn't spoken through. Every glance carried a weight neither of us could ignore anymore. That night, the building was nearly empty. A storm rattled against the windows, thunder low and steady. She stood by the desk, arms folded as though bracing against more than just the weather. I closed the door behind me and locked it without thinking. She noticed. "Why did you do that?" she asked, her voice low, warning. "Because I can't keep pretending," I said. Her eyes flicked to the lock, then back to me. "You don't know what this will cost." I took a step closer. "Then tell me to leave." Her silence was louder than thunder. I stopped just inches from her, close enough to feel the warmth radiating from her skin. The scent of her perfume mingled with the rain seeping faintly through the window. My breath caught, uneven. "You make this impossible," she whispered. Her eyes darted down to my mouth, then away too quickly. "And you make it unbearable," I replied. She shook her head, but her hand betrayed her. It lifted as though against her will, fingers brushing the line of my jaw. The touch was light, trembling, but it shattered whatever distance had been left. "Say something," I begged. Her lips parted. "I'm scared. Of me. Of myself." The honesty cracked her voice, raw and unguarded. I reached up, gently tucking a strand of hair behind her ear. My knuckles grazed her cheek. She leaned, barely, but enough that I felt it. "We can't go back," she murmured. "Then let's stop trying." The room pulsed with the storm outside and the storm inside us. My hand hovered at her waist, not daring to rest, not daring to retreat. She stepped closer, so close her forehead brushed mine, so close her breath mingled with mine. "I shouldn't," she whispered, but her body pressed against me like she already had. My voice broke into a whisper. "Then don't stop." Her eyes closed, her trembling hand sliding to my shoulder, anchoring herself. For a heartbeat, the world held still, our lips a breath apart, the decision teetering on the edge of no return. And then, finally, she exhaled, shaky but certain. "I can't keep pushing you away." The words weren't surrender, not entirely, but they were an answer. I let my forehead rest against hers, relief and fire burning through me all at once. Then we stopped lying. To ourselves, at least. Her laugh came soft, broken, but real. God help us both. We stood there, locked in the storm and in each other. No more pretenses left. Whatever happened next, the truth was finally clear. We couldn't unknow this, couldn't unfeel it. For the first time, we both understood. The storm outside had softened to a drizzle by the time we finally let ourselves breathe. She sat at the edge of her desk, shoulders lowered, as if she'd been carrying something for years and had only just set it down. I leaned against the filing cabinet, heart still racing, trying to believe the last hour had really happened. Neither of us spoke right away. Words had been too dangerous, too sharp. Now silence felt safer, soft, like a blanket wrapped around the both of us. At last, she looked up. "You should regret this," she said, but the way her voice cracked told me she didn't. "I don't," I whispered. "Not even for a second." Her lips parted, almost like she wanted to argue, but instead she let out a small laugh. Tired, almost disbelieving. "You're too young to know what you'll regret." "Then let me find out," I said. She shook her head, but when I stepped closer, she didn't move away. My hand reached for hers, hesitant at first, then steady. Her fingers curled around mine, warm, trembling slightly. The contact wasn't grand or dramatic, but it felt more real than anything I'd ever known. "You make it sound easy," she murmured, eyes lowered. "Maybe it is," I said. "Maybe we're the ones making it harder than it has to be." Her shoulders sagged, a surrender more than an agreement. She looked at me then, really looked, no walls, no pretense. In that gaze, I saw the woman she tried to hide, strong and guarded, yes, but also lonely, yearning, afraid to hope. I raised her hand slowly, pressing my forehead against the back of it. Her breath caught, shaky, and I felt her thumb brush against my skin in answer. She tugged me closer, until I stood between her knees at the desk. The distance that had once been unbearable was finally gone. Her arms lifted, wrapping around me, not tightly, but enough that I felt the weight of her body leaning into mine. I wrapped my arms around her in return, holding her like I'd wanted to since the first time I noticed the faint scar on her hand, the one she always tried to hide. No words, just closeness. Her head rested against my shoulder, her hair brushing my jaw. I pressed a gentle kiss to her forehead, slow, reverent, and she closed her eyes, sinking further into me. "Maybe this doesn't have to be a mistake," she whispered. "It never was," I answered. We stayed like that, the rain easing outside, the room finally at peace. It wasn't a perfect ending, Life never is, but it was ours. And for the first time, that was enough. Did you enjoy the story? What kind of stories would you like to hear next?